see something else. Do you see something between us and that boulder?
Yeah, there's somebody there, all right. We'll never make it past him.
We can't get around him to the left.
We're bound to run into him down on the right.
You know something, Brent? We're stuck.
As I'm getting older, chip upon my shoulder, rolling through life to roll over and die. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
Hey guys, it's Streed, and today I'm going to be reviewing the 1960s war film, The Young and the Brave. The Young and the Brave was directed by Francis D. Leon. It starred Rory Calhoun, William Bendix, and Manuel Padilla Jr. The film centers around three American Korean War soldiers, Ed Brent, Peter Kane, and Kirk Wilson. They managed to escape a torturous POW camp and take refuge with a Korean family. The communist soldiers arrive and brutally murder the family while the three men evade capture. Now their son, Han, is rendered an orphan. He ends up joining the soldiers along with an abandoned police dog he names Lobo, while the men desperately attempt to evade the pursuing communist soldiers directly on their trail. Wilson ends up dying in a minefield, but the men discover another escaped soldier named John Estway, who is brainwashed and relentlessly tortured into releasing private information, which causes minor friction between the group. Meanwhile, on their quest for survival and freedom, Ed and Peter debate on who should adopt the orphan boy Han. This film was released with abysmal reviews, with so many claiming it's boring, generic, and hackneyed. While the film was unequivocally flawed, it's not an unbearable experience by any means. I quite enjoyed the film and thought it was profoundly endearing and compelling. It may not stick out as a masterpiece in the grand landscape of war cinema, but at least in my eyes, it's an enjoyable, simplistic, and engaging war film. Honestly, I really don't understand the hate with this film, because I looked on IMDb, and I had a whole fucking barrage of reviews saying this was fucking horrible, this was boring, worst film I've ever seen. Now listen, the film is not without its flaws, but it is far from boring. It is far from the worst film. And people are even saying it's like cheaply shot and shit, when honestly it doesn't even look that cheap. I mean, sure, low budget, but it doesn't look any better or worse than most, like most of your regular films from the early 60s. It honestly looks fine to me. And this, honestly, I personally, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a nice little film, in spite of its flaws. It's certainly it has a lot more value than people really give it credit for. There's only one dude on IMDb who actually thought it was great and had actually the same score as me. And I think this would be a great introduction for I think this would be a great introduction to war cinema. I'd suggest you should show your kids this, because it's not too visceral. I mean, of course there's still death in it. It is a war film, okay? So we're not all PG, but it's not too violent. I think it gets across a good patriotic message. It's quite endearing. I think if you were to show this to a kid, the kid would sort of, see themselves in the kid character Han, and there's also a cute little German Shepherd dog in the film named Lobo. So I think this will be a great film to sort of introduce you to war cinema, because it's not really complex, but it still is entertaining. And if your kid's not an iPad addicted moron, I think you should really show this to them and let it be sort of the introduction to war cinema, because it's got all the great war cinema tropes in there. The characters are interesting and such and such. I'll elaborate in the strengths. And it's a very endearing film. It's endlessly endearing. It's a really sweet film too. There's good chemistry between the characters, and honestly, all around, I'm baffled as to why people hate this so goddamn much. Like, much like The Hard Ride, people gave that film scathing reviews, but it turned out to be a very pleasant watch. Now for the strengths. The film is actually very well shot. I mean, it's not stunning or anything, but I think they did good with what they could. You get to see a lot of beautiful landscapes. There's a variety of not really a variety of locations, but I think it was filmed in a perfectly fine way. Maybe it doesn't stand out that much, maybe not too many stark shots, but it's definitely not as cheap as people say. All right. Now for the characters. I really enjoyed the characters for the most part. There's only one that I didn't really care for, that didn't really have much of an impact on me. And I think the acting was actually suitable. I think it was... I kind of expected worse from this film. I went in thinking, oh boy, this could either be really good or really boring. You know, I was afraid because I didn't read the full reviews. I kind of just looked at the sort of the titles and the ratings, and which I don't usually do that to determine a film. I'm kind of, I kind of let myself, because I'm very different from other people, because I don't let reviews determine things for me. I sort of let it be a what's that called? A warmer, just to be like, well, let's try to sense the waters and see what sticks to me most, you know what I mean? But yeah, the characters are pretty interesting. Rory Calhoun, he plays the charismatic Ed Brandt, and he's sort of a masculine dude, but he's also sort of the leader type, and he's pretty interesting. I mean, we're not talking like deep depth and interesting, but he's somewhat interesting. You want to see them succeed. And there's also Peter Kane, who's like a hothead at the beginning. He proposes they get rid of the kid, like, oh, you're just gonna get in the way. And he actually goes through a lot of character development. He ends up really taking a liking to the kid, and he views him as like a son. And it's honestly beautiful that at the beginning of that he transforms so much, because at the beginning of the film, he's just proposing that they throw out the kid, who cares what happens to him. But then when he gets to know him, and the rescue helicopter ends up going there to pick him up, and Han's not around, he's like, no, we gotta stay here and get him. We gotta save him. And him and him and Brent, they end up staying behind to save him. And honestly, I think top-notch writing, top-notch character development. I honestly don't see what people are hating so much about this movie. I mean, listen, it's a bit usual, okay? Like, that's one of my criticisms that I'll mention later, is it's unmemorable, but it's still somehow captivating and interesting to me. And there's also a third guy. His name is Kurt Wilson. He gets killed going into a minefield, and he doesn't really make much of an impact. And then there's another guy, John Estway, who apparently got brainwashed by the communists, and he got tortured by them, so he revealed info. So the group's kind of distrusting of him, and he's pretty underwritten. Like, he gets his moment of glory near the end, but I feel like they didn't do enough with him, honestly. I think they could have built up on the tension with, wonder if they could trust him, maybe make him a little more, make him, psychologically damaged, maybe, a very paranoid, PTSD sort of ridden guy. I think that would have been a little more interesting. The potential was there, but I feel like they just didn't utilize it at all. And near the end, he actually redeems himself. He was never really hated that much in the first place. He was. There was some minor friction, but very underutilized friction, It would have made for some good drama, admittedly. But yeah, by the end, he redeems himself when he goes up into the helicopter, and he tells them that Han is, where Han is. He's apparently laying somewhere, but now they know where to go to rescue him. And as for Han, even though he's played by a child actor, he's actually not annoying. I didn't find myself hating him, because honestly, and if anyone knows me in real life or my personal life, you know that I fucking hate children. They are annoying, uncultured little brats, and I can't fucking stand them. Listen, I want to have a son or a daughter when I get older, you know, like when I'm 30 or so. But as I am, as a 19-year-old right now, I don't fucking like children. They're annoying. But somehow Han didn't actually annoy me. I thought he was a pretty cool-ass character. Instead of deter from the group, instead of being a stupid, annoying little asshole, he actually helps them. He helps them find food. He investigates the house. He takes a beating, and all while he's fucking stone-faced. Like, not stone-faced. He's obviously has emotions. And there's a scene where he's crying in the dark, and people, and what's his name, Ed Brandt, he's assuming that he's like crying in his sleep, but still he faces this shit head on, and they assume that he's like 9 or 10 years old, and we find out that he is 7. He's 7 years old. He witnessed his parents being murdered, and he's got the mental fortitude of a like better than the combat veterans. Like, even Peter Kane admits that, holy shit, when I was his age, I was crying to my mom about a nightmare, but he's like tough as fuck. He's honestly one of the most resilient and likable kid characters in most films I've seen, because, like I said, most of them annoyed the shit out of me, but he was cool. If there's any criticism I have to give to him, and this is probably not even a criticism, this is just sort of like a general personal pet peeve, and it's not even a big one. I couldn't really understand most of what he was saying, but I think that was intentional. You're supposed to get to know him and like him because of his personality and his actions. His actions really speak for what kind of character he is. And I thought the film was actually minorly suspenseful, you know, because as we go along the film, we sort of see the commies steadily going after them, you know, as they try to find food, as they're trying to escape, they're slowly approaching. I think more action could have been put in, but I kind of like the film's pace. Like, it's a weakness, but also like it's a strength. It's both, honestly. The slow pace works for the character development, but sometimes, and very few times, it actually kind of distracts from the film. So that's what I have to say on the pacing. But yeah, it is minorly suspenseful, and the film itself, it sort of the atmosphere of it, and the atmosphere is not strong, but it kind of reminds me of an episode of Combat, you know, that old show with Vic Morrow. That's actually a pretty good show that I recommend anyone watch. And the plot is actually somewhat similar, I noticed, to Figures in a Landscape, with the characters running, being pursued by these like soldiers, you know, and they're not convicts or anything, but they're running through the wilderness and such, and they're trying to survive, they're trying to escape. So I thought that it's obviously not as great as Figures in a Landscape. I will still retain the opinion that that film is a masterpiece, but this film sort of it felt like a spiritual predecessor. It felt like a spiritual predecessor to Figures in a Landscape, which I really liked. And as for the weaknesses, like I said, it's sort of unmemorable. There's lots of cliches. I thought it was a really weird choice to cast a Mexican boy to play a Korean boy, but that's not like a huge criticism. It's you can tell that the kid has like a Mexican accent. He's not really good at pulling off a Korean one, but still likable character. And the film kind of meanders in places, unfortunately. In places it gets kind of boring, but most of the film is actually, I wouldn't say action-packed, but it's compelling. I found myself drawn in. I actually stopped writing my notes for a long part of the film, and I watched it and I just absorbed it, you know, and I was like, you know what, this is really interesting. I really like this. And Lieutenant Nero, he's a minor character, but his acting is stiff. He's played by Robert Goshen, but yeah, his acting is kind of stiff. And also another fact about Han, he smokes in the film, and oh boy, that's something that wouldn't be allowed to. I don't even condone it. No one should smoke. Children, adults, fuck that shit. Get yourself some weed, man. That's good for all ages. Yeah, I don't know. It's better. It's hell of a lot better than cigarettes. Now, what would I rate this film? Personally, taking into account the strengths and weaknesses, I would probably have to give it an 8 out of 10. I was sort of struggling between, giving it a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10, but honestly, I think I enjoyed it way more than I didn't. The film could have improved in places, but what it is at the end of the day is a nice little charming, heartwarming tale about two dudes getting to know this little boy and feeling like father figures to him and wanting to get him home. And everything is generally fine here. And listen, you may be thinking from the way I'm describing it that I'm meaning fine is in the middle of the road. It's not middle of the road. I'd say it's a little above middle of the road. Like one crank down. I feel like if the acting would have been bad, the characters would have been unlikable, I think it would have been cranked down to like a 5 or 6 out of 10. But I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 because it's so fucking close to being great. I feel like if the pacing would have been slightly sort of refined, I feel like if it would have been a little more memorable, and if I feel like if they would have actually cast a Korean boy to play Han, I think it would have definitely improved the film. But overall, I really enjoyed it. If you're a fan of war cinema, I would check it out for curiosity's sake. Honestly, I came out very happy with the film, and I'm glad I watched it despite the stupid-ass, ignorant, abysmal reviews. Well, guys, that was my review, and I will see you all next time.